Here's what I was sort of saying at the end of my video that I just finished making. Deep equals 30. The 30th of November was 13 days before the 13th of December, which is 11 days from now. 13. That's how old I was. And this is the place where I got kidnapped. Weston Park. This is where it happened. Within 100 meters of where I am now. It was 1989. I think it was around December 6th. But I can't be sure of the date. The date has never been verified. There was an end of year 7 school picnic, but I don't know exactly when it was. $92,257 k's on my odometer, because I've just driven from Deakin down to Weston Park. Temperature has dropped. My car said 31 just before, which is kind of weird because Jacob equals 31. And Jacob Wetterling was born on the 17th. So, over there is where it happened. About a month and a half after Jacob Wetterling was abducted and murdered. I was at my end of year 7 school picnic. And I wandered about half a K. Because the school picnic was that way. If you walk that way about half a K, you get to the barbecue area on the edge of Lake Burley Griffin. I wandered about half a K with some other kids. And we were standing just over there. There's a little fig tree actually. Very close, just over there to where it happened. I just wound up the window because it's starting to rain again. Thursday, Thor's Day. The god of lightning and thunder is Thor. 57 is Daffodil. 57 is DJ Ming. 92 is Horror. And the place I was taken when I was abducted was Hobday's Cottage. Now you can go and buy coffee and stuff there. But that was not the case in 1989. It was just an old abandoned farmhouse, that's what it seemed like. It used to be the caretaker's residence, would you say? The chief nurseryman of Yarralumla Nursery lived in Hobday's Cottage. It was built between 1923 and 1924. You know, it's really weird. There's a lot of weird stuff, but Yarralumla Nursery, it didn't always used to be at Weston Park. Never used to be at Weston Park. It used to be across the other side of Lake Burley Griffin, actually. What is now the Canberra Museum, what used to be the Old Canberra Hospital, a place that ended tragically with the death of Katie Bender. When they imploded the hospital, a fragment of the old hospital killed a little girl on the edge of Lake Burley Griffin. I was born in that hospital. And this is where it gets very strange. I used to look across Lake Burley Griffin over this way when I was in primary school. Obviously I didn't know that one day I was gonna get kidnapped here, but I used to look over here across the lake because you used to be able to look out the window across Lake Burley Griffin over towards Weston Park, which is where I am now. I probably should turn off my thing. DJ Ming. Abduction victim. 11. The boy who was 11. Jake was murdered about a month and a half before I was kidnapped. Jacob Wetzling, the boy from Minnesota, was murdered about a month and a half. If it was the 6th of December when I was abducted, then it was 45 days after Jake's abduction. Which is one of the many reasons I suspect it actually was the 6th of December, but I can't be sure. I can be sure that I was 13 years old. "11 days from now, it will be the 13th of December. I was 13, Jake was 11, about a month and a half between Jake's abduction and my abduction. Give or take a few days. It was about a month and a half. Like I said, the date of the school picnic has never been verified, so I can't be sure. I did go to my old high school and I asked, could they verify, and they said, well, you know, we'll try. And they tried. It's a long time ago though. They could not find a record. The school secretary though said, the date that you've said would be very close if it's not right. Because she said, from memory, I think it was around the middle of the week, back in those days. And that would have been the last week of school. That's what the school secretary said. The same school secretary who was there when I was there. And her son was a student in my year. And his name was John. Spelt differently to the boy John in the Dark Tower. John Chambers, who goes by Jake Chambers. His name is spelt with a H. The same as John Peace Hobday, the first chief nurseryman of Yarralumla Nursery. And it was his residence, Hobday's Cottage, built in 1923-1924. Later it was abandoned. I didn't know it existed. I came here and I found the place where I got kidnapped, but I couldn't find where the school picnic was. A kid who I was friends with later on in high school, he remembered where the picnic was. He showed me on a map. And I realized it was a bit of a little distance from the place I got kidnapped. It's kind of weird. I came straight to the place I got kidnapped, even though I don't remember what happened to me. The rain has stopped. I guess we can get out now. Probably should wind up the window. Not a lot of battery left, but I can walk over to where I got kidnapped. But before I do that, I had a memory of running away from the kidnapper, who I didn't know was a kidnapper, you see. Just a guy who I called the Aquarium Man, because that's how he got me in. He told me, he asked me a question. Do you like aquariums? Actually, I'm going to walk down here. Over there is where I got kidnapped. Just over there. Can I be more specific? It's roughly just there, pretty close to there. As in, there's a little fig tree there, which I figured out is pretty close to the spot. And that would be about, I don't know, it's hard looking through this. Okay, it's about, I think that's it. That's the little fig tree. That's where I got kidnapped. Within a couple of meters of that fig tree, I had this memory of running this way with the other kids. We ran away from the aquarium man. That's how he got me in. The question, do you like aquariums? To which I said, yes. Good strategy, I guess, if you're a kidnapper, is to ask a leading question that gets your victim, your target, to say yes. A positive answer, you see. That's what advertisers do. Yes, I did like aquariums, and that's the spooky part. Pretty interesting. The storm is like, well, there's a couple of storms. And there's a seagull. It's hard to see sometimes when it's blue sky and cloud. But that's definitely a seagull. Freshly mown grass. Looks like it was mowed today. The grass is growing like crazy because of all the rain. I don't think everyone's managing to keep up with their grass at the moment in Canberra. It's weird. Yeah, I do go off on tangents, I know. It's because I read too much Stephen King. He goes off on a few tangents too. I don't mind. Life is full of tangents. Especially when you've been abducted. Everything is rather tangential. I don't know. That's what someone wrote about me. Tangents. I go off on tangents. Well, I do. I know I do. But the weird thing about the aquarium, the question about the aquarium, do you like aquariums? What makes that super weird is the fact that I really liked aquariums. I was actually obsessed with aquariums. So it's like he was psychic. It's like he knew exactly what to ask for me to say yes. How did he know that I was obsessed with aquariums? See, that's the spooky part. But it gets spookier. This is where I ran to in my fake memory of escaping. And I was talking before about the boy who said wetling means storm boy. The analogy he used was duckling, because ling means the same in English as it does in German. Ling, little one. It's interesting how you call Jake the storm boy, because that's basically what his name means. Weta is weather. Ling is little one. Like as in duckling. Well, there's a young duck. Wouldn't quite say it's a duckling, but it looks like a teenager. A young duck. This is marked as the Marina. When I looked at the map, that's what it says, Marina. Like I said, my friend from high school, who I didn't know in year 7. I knew who he was, but we weren't friends in year 7. We became friends in year 9, year 10. later on in school. I was out of my depth in year 7. I had no friends. So the kids I was with, they weren't my friends. They were classmates, acquaintances, fellow students, but they weren't my friends. I had no friends. I was totally out of my depth when I came to high school, because I came from a very small school to a very big school. And it took me a long time to adjust. And I was very, very anxious. Crippled actually by anxiety. Panic attacks every day. And that started before I got kidnapped. I don't mind tangents because life is full of tangents. As long as you come back eventually to what you were saying, it doesn't matter. This is the Lake Marina. This is the place I ran to in my false memory. Because in my false memory, there was no marina here. It was the school picnic barbecue area, which I then knew was not right after I spoke to my friend from year 10 through to year 12 and beyond, obviously, because it was many years after school that he pointed out on the map where the barbecue area is. It's nowhere near here. But in my false memory, this is where I ran, to the barbecue area. There is no barbecue area here, it's the Lake Marina. It says Marina on the map. The reason I went off on tangents is because I can't tell the story from that angle. I have to come over this way. The thing that makes the aquarium so spooky, even the kids who I used to look after, because I used to do after school care, I told the kids about what happened to me, and they believed me. One of them said, to sum it up, you were cursed by God. And that's after I said what I'm about to say now. The Old Canberra Hospital, the place where I was born, they used to have fish tanks in there. And I used to sit there watching the fish swimming around in their fish tanks. Little aquarium, you know. That's what I used to do. For hours and hours and hours and hours. Just sitting there watching the fish. So when I say I was obsessed with aquariums, it's true. Not in a bad way. How can it be bad? There's nothing more relaxing than just watching a fish swing around in a fish tank. It's very relaxing. Probably the only thing that can match that is looking out across a lake, which I was able to do as well because all I had to do was look out the window. The Old Canberra Hospital looked across Lake Griffin, it looked over to here. And those pine trees, they are the reason I was able to find the place. I knew there was a big row of pine trees where I got kidnapped, so I didn't know it was Weston Park. All I knew it was near the lake, and it was on this side. And there was a big row of radiata pine trees, really tall ones. And I was like, well, if those trees are still there, I should be able to find the place. Well, those trees were still there. And I had like a mental photograph of those trees in my head. Like a photographic still image of the exact outline of those trees from the other side. So there was no shadow of a doubt. When I found the place, I knew. And my body was telling me in all kinds of ways. I felt like I was Well, I saw a counsellor for years. Surreal was the word that we landed on to describe what I was feeling standing there the first time, just on the other side of those pine trees. Surreal. It felt surreal. Almost like I was in a dream, out of my body, which I was, because I did run away from my body. That's why I don't remember what happened to me. I don't remember it. Anything. Nothing. Zero memory. Now I can show you, I can tell you the story now. What makes it so freaky? If you look across to where the museum is, which I think is over there somewhere, Old Canberra Hospital used to be situated where the museum is situated now. And you used to be able to look across Lake Burley Griffin to where I'm standing now. I'm a bit geographically challenged when it comes to what's what over there, because I used to always be looking from over there over here. Wow, that looks different from here. I'm guessing that's Mount Taylor. Mount Ainslie. Mount Taylor's south in Tuggeranong. I've walked up Mount Ainslie many times. Anyway, the Old Canberra Hospital, the one they imploded but it exploded, and a little girl was killed on the edge of Lake Burley Griffin. Katie Bender. I was there for that implosion. I was watching from the lawns of the Parliament House. I used to look across the lake from hospital because I was in hospital a lot. Through my primary school years, I was in hospital a lot. I was a chronic asthmatic. If I got the flu, it usually turned into a chest infection, pneumonia, pleurisy, everything. Asthma, real bad asthma. And I would nearly die. Happened many times. Near-death experiences. And while I was in hospital, recovering, I used to look over this way, across the lake. Aquariums and the lake. Relaxing, very relaxing, therapeutic for the mind. And whatever's therapeutic for the mind is therapeutic for the body. And vice versa. Because they're connected. What's therapeutic for one person might not be for another. Everyone's different. What makes it really spooky? The whole thing, what ties it together? Why did that kid say you were cursed by God? It's because Yarralumla Nursery never used to be there. It never used to be over there. Yarralumla Nursery's a few hundred metres that way. It used to be over there. Yarralumla Nursery used to be where the museum is now, where the Old Canberra Hospital used to stand, the place where I was born, the place where I spent months when I was a kid, trying not to die. And probably wondering why I had to struggle just to breathe all the time. It was a struggle to breathe. At times it was a desperate struggle just to breathe for me. When I was in primary school and early years of high school, not much better. Year 7, I had a long stint in hospital. And it saved me from the hell that I was suffering because I was getting bullied. Viciously bullied. I've got nothing against those kids. I later became friends with the kid who used to physically bully me. But not until year 12. It took 6 years. Empathy. I saw empathy in his eyes when I burned my hand. I went to school with a bandaged up hand, having burnt it real bad. And the kid who bullied me in year 7 said, "What happened, man?" And I told him. It was a gas lantern, and I leant on it with all my weight. And I spent a night in absolute agony. I think that's the worst pain I've ever felt. It just went on and on and on. I had to put my hand in a bucket of water. And that's how I tried to sleep. A cooler, you know, like a water pitcher, drinking water pitcher. I had my hand in it all night. Otherwise, I think I could not have survived that night without the water. So it always comes back to water. I always seem to get saved by water, somehow. This battery is about to run out, but the place where I got kidnapped, the place I ran from, it's pretty close to those birches over there. It's to the left of there. I worked out it's near the fig tree. The fig tree is almost the exact spot. Within a couple of meters, I reckon. I know because my mind photographed the trees. And while these pine trees have aged and partly died since I came back here and found the place, they're still here. And I think the fig tree's just over there. I remember walking under the pines on our way over. This is sort of as far as we came on our walk. We were standing, it can't have been too hot that day because we were standing out in the sun instead of under the shade of the pines. So it was near the birches, but very close to this fig tree. If it is a fig tree. It's probably not a fig tree, I'm just calling it a fig tree, it's got big leaves. It's probably a whatsy thing, pistachia. Yeah, it's not is it? I don't know what it is. It's a long time since I did horticulture. It's one of those trees, big leaves. Definitely not a fig tree. I think it's a pistachia tree, whatever. Not a pistachia. This is where it happened. About here. Because I know, because that's the trees. When I came back here, those trees were still fully green. And that's the profile. I remembered every detail of it. Like a photograph. Every branch, every leaf. And I mean everything. Exactly, my brain had a photograph. That's it though. probably the last thing I saw before he drove his car down this bike path and parked here. So after he took me, I'm guessing he drove back up here, back up along this bike path, and he must have turned left because that's where Hobday's cottage is. It's now like there's a retail nursery there and the brasserie, the coffee place. That's where it happened. And after whatever happened, I walked down to the lake on the other side. Because I remember in a different kind of way, vaguely, the blend of radiata pines and manna gums, or candlebark gums, that combination of trees. I thought for a while that's where I was taken, but no, it's not where I was taken. It's where I started to come out of my trance. It's where I started to come out of my daze. I must have been in a total daze. And then eventually I must have found my way back to the school picnic. Never said a word to anyone. At all. I don't remember going back to the school picnic, but I must have because I caught the school bus home.